Marcia, okay with me.
Okay, so in theory, she should be.
And then after you said 6 o'clock, okay with me again. Said that.
Well,
Could I text her?
yeah, see if she's coming, if she's gonna be here. You know, if she's running late or something, we could wait a minute for her last. Hi, Barb.
Because if she's not here, we can't vote, right?
I guess not, yeah.
That is correct.
Who is there right now?
Me and Narina and Pete is here.
So who's missing?
Marcia,
Oh, did anybody contact her? I know she had the surgery.
Narina, I think is trying to text her right now.
Yeah.
She has to reach out to me.
Because she replied to the email and said she could make it. But, you know, maybe something came up or changed or something, I don't know.
Oh, okay, because she probably needs a ride because I know she can't drive.
Yeah.
We could at least look over the policy, right, and see if there's any changes that we'd want to make.
Yeah, I think we can discuss it, we just can't do anything official if we don't have.
Did you send
Right.
something over?
It was the previous month, we sent over a
For the computer usage or what was the trend?
library patron behavior.
Okay.
Yeah. So I didn't bring an extra copy of that.
Let me find it. She'll find it. Do you have it handy, Pete?
I'm pulling it up now.
I got it.
Got it? Okay.
Which one is your proposed first one?
I think they're the same thing. I just did it as PDF and Word.
Norina, did you try calling her? Because sometimes she, it doesn't have the phone with her, but if you call her, it rings.
I didn't want to be insistent because if she's having an issue, like, I don't want to bug her. I don't know, should I?
Yeah, just to say if something has come up.
All right, let me give her a call. Maybe she forgot. Hey, good. I was just wondering if you are planning on coming to the policy committee meeting? Not for today. Okay. All right, no problem. No worries at all. I just wanted to check in. No, you're fine. All right. No, don't worry about it. Okay, hopefully he's okay. Thanks. Bye. She's at the hospital with her son who's been sick for 5 days.
Okay.
This is why I didn't want to call. I don't want to bother her.
Because personnel was scheduled for tonight, they canceled. So I get she's on that one as well.
How could she be at both at the same time?
Because this one was originally scheduled for 5:30 to 6:30.
And then personnel?
Personnel 6:30 to 7:30. And personnel canceled and we moved this one.
All right, well, we might as well, since we're here, go over this. And we just might have to wait to bring it to a vote or something like that. So,
Or could we bring it anyway to the board and just say we didn't have a quorum, so we're just putting it out to you
Right.
guys?
yeah, I suppose we could do that.
Yeah, there would be a committee recommended action
Yeah,
attached to it.
just have that.
Right.
So just, to go back to the, Pete had sent, when he circulated this draft policy, he provided kind of the goals that they were trying to achieve with this policy. So I'm just gonna read that just to give us kind of, context as we look through the actual policy. So there's 4 kind of bullet points here. One was explain to both the staff and the public that all staff members are able to enforce the policy and that only potential bans are the exclusive responsibility of the director. It says many of our staff have been interpreting the policy to mean they need me to come and enforce it. So that's one piece of it, was just to clarify that, all staff are able to enforce this without going up the chain. Second one was make some infractions more explicit: lewd, sexually harassing or aggressive behavior, destruction of property, including the bathrooms, strong odors that impact the enjoyment of the library by others, failing to follow directions from staff. As the policy is currently written, staff are struggling to demonstrate to patrons what part of the policy they're violating. Third bullet was create a mandate that any behavior that impacts the use of the library by others is prohibited, so staff have the ability to respond to violations not explicitly covered by the policy. And then last was modernizing some of the areas we do not need to enforce. We removed board games from prohibited items and modified the food and drink language so eating is allowed so long as it doesn't damage property or impact library use by others. So those were kind of the big picture bullet points that were guiding this. So I guess, do we just want to kind of go, start to finish like bit by bit through the policy and discuss, or I don't want to tackle these suggestions?
I wish I made a note of the new additions. Sorry, go ahead, Barb.
Oh, on number 6,
Mhm.
on the proposed policy, I like our wording a little bit better, but if we stick with this wording, carrying all weapons from library premises, I think it should be carrying all weapons on library premises. But if you look at ours, I think it's even worded better, but take a look.
Oh, because it says bans weapons from library premises.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, because
Patrons must remain fully clothed while using the library. This has been a problem.
Yes.
Oh my God.
Typically, it's people, more often taking their shoes off, but we do have people who take their shirts off, take their pants off.
hey. Yeah, so like just as a stylistic change between the currently existing version and this revised draft, a list of things in the old version were kind of stated as it leads off with the library, and then it was prohibits this, prohibits that, bans this, whatever. So it was stated as kind of what the library is doing, and this one instead describes the behaviors. It's not like the library's action prohibits, bans, whatever. It's the behavior that you're not supposed to do. So it's engaging in instead of prohibits engaging or whatever. So that, I think, and it looks like that from was just a
Typo.
leftover. Yeah, from converting it over and not changing the preposition there.
So we just change the from to on.
I think that works.
And
So,
then
go ahead, Barb.
I had a question on 17.
Yep.
Petitioning, campaigning, electioneering, interviewing, survey taking, soliciting, sales, or similar speech or conduct. Is our parking lot considered public property, or is that our property?
It's our property.
Okay, so any of that, like campaigning or picketing or something, would have to be done on the sidewalk in front.
Right. Yep. They have to take it just off library properties. They can do it anywhere in Mercy Care Lane or Western.
Okay,
It's similar to smoking.
okay, those are the only questions I had.
Okay.
What about, I'm just thinking, I've had this before where I used to work. I know it mentions odors from perfume and other things. Some people have to where they sweat profusely and they really can't help that. I've had that in my work before, and it was tricky navigating around telling that person like they need to have better hygiene as opposed to this is a medical condition.
Right.
Also, the loud noises, some people have like a, like they can't control it, right? Like they make some kind of noise because it's part of their disability.
Mhm.
So I don't know if we should mention somewhere that any of these activities that would result out of a medical,
Making
I
a,
don't know.
but I think that's a good idea, maybe putting, not a disclaimer, but sort of caveat in
Yeah,
there.
because, you know,
Because
you
it's,
can't help it if it's involuntary,
right,
right?
and a lot of the purpose of this is to give the staff an opening to, which hopefully what's a conversation with the
Right.
person. So it's not necessarily to like bring the hammer down on them and be like, your odor is offensive. It's to be like, hey, you're inhibiting other people's ability to use the library. And then if they say like, oh, it's my ointment, it's my, I use it for medical reasons,
Right.
something like that, then it's like, oh, okay, well, you know. But I do think that having something, and that might be something we run by the lawyer, just to be like, what do we have to put in here to excuse medically allowed behavior?
Right.
And I guess, you know, and I don't know to which ones that might apply. I guess one of the questions is, do you include that in specific, you know, listed, you know, prohibited conduct where you kind of incorporate a little exception or something into that? Or do you have kind of a general catch-all on the enforcement, you know, part where it says, accommodations will be, reasonable accommodations will be made for legitimate, you know.
Local conditions.
medical or-
Yeah, I like that.
Because that might, you know,
Yeah, I like that exact language actually.
That actually as a catch-all would work for a lot of these because, you know, this policy will be a public document and we don't want patrons to weaponize against other patrons. So if somebody's like, that kid over there is screaming, and I want them thrown out, we can say like, well, we make accommodations as needed.
Well, can we make accommodations for crazy kids? Crazy accommodations.
Yeah.
I'm also referring to my own, so
Yeah.
I'm not trying to be direct. But I know my own kids.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's, you know, we want to have that ability to, you know, we don't want to be hamstrung by the policy. We're like, well, now we have to enforce it.
Right.
It's, you know, the kid doesn't know they need to be quiet.
so. So I probably somewhere in the paragraph immediately after the numbered list, I don't know if it would be right at the very beginning of it. At the paragraph, we
Yeah, right after 23 as a
Yeah.
separate sentence.
say something like,
What did you say, reasonable accommodation?
yeah, but I said something like reasonable accommodations will be made for legitimate medical needs or disabilities or something.
So something like reasonable accommodations may be made for legitimate medical reasons or other extenuating circumstances.
Yeah, that's fine.
The library staff's discretion. Because again, that helps to empower our staff to feel like they can work within the policy.
Right.
That way too, if you have somebody with Tourette's or something that,
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
that the staff can understand that and it's nothing that the person can do about it, so.
Right.
Okay, so we'll work language for that. All right,
Does any of this stuff apply? Is there a lady that tries to sleep here sometimes?
I'm not a specific person. Periodically, we get people who do fall asleep here, and that's usually just a, you know, kind of a tap next to them to be like, hey, you can't do that. But we haven't had, since I've been here, anyone who's like camping or
Okay.
setting up like a bedroom situation.
so let's circle back to the top just for a minute. We'll just make sure we're happy with that. So we got the first paragraph here, the Oakland Public Library strives to ensure a safe and appropriate environment for the conduct of library business by both patrons and staff. Towards that end, the Board of Trustees of the Oakland Public Library has established rules of appropriate behavior for library use and charged the library director with enforcement of this policy. And then we have this, all library staff members are responsible for ensuring compliance with this policy. That's new. You know, that wasn't in the previous one, but I think that addresses the concern that you were talking about. I think it doesn't really, I find it a little weird when our policies, because most of our policies don't, they just state the policy, but this has like this, you know, this toward that end, the Board of Trustees has established this policy. That seems like you don't really need that. We just like, we adopt the policy and the policy is what it is. The policy doesn't have to say this is the policy, but it doesn't hurt anything. So
Yeah.
it's kind of one of those.
And I think it does help our staff, you know, who are reading it for the first time, who don't understand governance.
All right.
Where if a patron says like, you and what army, we're like, well, it's the Board of Trustees and the director and me.
All right. So moving on. This policy has been adopted for the comfort and protection of all who use library materials and services. Conduct will not be permitted if it is just disruptive, disturbing, or potentially harmful to others. If it otherwise interferes with the enjoyment and use of the library by other patrons, if it interferes with the ability of staff to perform their duties, or if it is inconsistent with the library's mission. So that's kind of the general, you know, broad statement there, and we've got the next paragraph where it says that the list is not exhaustive, and these are just examples. So we're kind of broadening. You know, you had those two different bullet points. One that was like, let's provide some more concrete, specific things that, you know, to allow us to do it, but also express that it's kind of broad. So I just want to think through. I don't necessarily have a problem with it, but are we this broad description? Are we happy with the scope of that? I think it seems okay to me. I mean, it's mostly, you know, just about people interfering with others' use of the library. That's the main thing here. I'm not clear totally what's covered by that last inconsistent with the library's mission. Like, what does that capture that the rest of the paragraph does?
So I'm not sure. I think that was probably a holdover from me trying to merge the original document with this document and also with some of the like Albany Public Libraries examples.
Yeah.
Some of these things might be redundant and
Well,
for completeness.
what's our library mission is libraries for all or something like that, right? I mean, when I try to hide books that they don't agree with and behind stacks just because they don't like them, or
Prevent people from entering.
yeah, I mean, that's a little
Yeah,
more.
I feel like all that stuff would be
I don't know
covered
if
by
that would-
the rest of it. Again, I'm not sure there's anything wrong with it. I just wonder what it exactly, you know, like, because basically, you know, like, I think those things that, you know, those examples you just gave would fit under these, you know, interfering with the enjoyment and use of the library by other patrons
Yeah.
are pretty broad already.
Who knows, but who knows? It's better to include more and then say, oh,
I suppose.
that's against the
Yeah.
library mission.
Yeah, that's,
You can't think of all the stuff that people can come up with.
yeah. Well, I think I probably agree. I don't think it necessarily does any harm. It just wasn't clear to me what work it's doing there. Like, is
Like
that
what's added.
what's inconsistent with the library's mission that we would want to be able to prohibit that isn't already covered by all these other, you know, disruptive, disturbing, interfering with the enjoyment and use, like all these other, you know, interfering with the staff, all that stuff. Like it seems like that's already pretty broad. So, but again, I could go either way on it. I don't
I
necessarily.
don't think it harms anything.
That's fine. Okay.
You know, getting back to the pants issue. You said they removed pants. Did they have like shorts underneath, like in the summertime, or what was the occasion? Or was it just a mentally unstable person?
It's been both. So we've had people who are suffering with a mental disability who don't realize they can't just take their clothes off in the library. We've also had people who are saying, well, I need to apply an ointment and my ointment needs to dry, so I'm going to take my pants off. We've never had somebody fully nude in the library. Typically, they have some level of underwear on.
In the bathroom or like,
Yeah.
different thing. You don't know what people are gonna come up with.
So we had in the bathroom, in the study room, and on the floor of the library, we've had people disrobe. They're always very, when we say, hey, you can't do that, they're always like, oh, sorry, but it's one of those things you wouldn't think we'd have to say.
Okay, so, the last paragraph before the numbered list, the following are examples of behaviors which are not permitted. The list is not exhaustive, but it's provided to illustrate the types of behaviors prohibited under this policy. In the event of disruptive behavior that is not covered by this policy, the library director or their designee may enforce this policy to the extent necessary to ensure the safety of patrons and staff and the ability for the public to have access to library resources and services. So,
Would we want to put that, what we put as the last paragraph, that there are medical exceptions up into the intro, or leave it until the end?
I think it's okay at the end because, again, this is just saying it's a representative list, like an example of examples. The end is where you get to kind of enforcement, like what we do if somebody's violating this. So I think that's kind of more where it's, if you say, okay, somebody's violating this, thing listed on the policy, what do we do about it? Well, maybe it's subject to some accommodation, so we don't need to, do whatever. I think it fits more in the kind of remedial section. That's my.
Well, I think it's like, as lawyers, you go for the rule and then you state the exception.
Yeah.
The rule and then the exceptions at the end.
All right, so I guess we just go down the list. Engaging in loud, abusive, aggressive, or threatening conduct, fighting or challenging another to fight, using profane language or obscene behavior, or engaging in harassing behavior of any kind. That's number one. I'm always iffy about those kind of broad things, because while we kind of understand what we're getting at here and everything, it's just probably doesn't matter. Obscene in a legal context has a very specific definition, which is what people normally mean by obscene. And here it's all about the disruption and the interfering with use and everything. But it is, it's probably fine,
It doesn't have to be interpreted in the legal.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. It's probably fine.
I don't see anything wrong with that.
Yeah. All right, number two, engaging in loud conversations, screaming, yelling, or making any other noise that disturbs other library users. So, I think that's, again, it's so what is, what's the general kind of, I guess what's the policy or thought or whatever about, volume level in the library? Because, I know there's been a shift where traditionally libraries were, very quiet places and everybody's supposed to only talk in a whisper, it's very silent. But I know there's been a modern trend towards saying, well, no, when you're going to, talk to the information desk or whatever, you should be able to speak in a conversational voice, and not everybody all hushed. You can have conversations with people or whatever. But I don't have a good sense for what's the kind of, not necessarily rule, but what's the kind of the vibe here, or what's the kind of the culture of this library.
You don't come here often?
I come here, but I don't know because
I come here all the time.
Yeah, it's I love looking at it from the lens of the vibe check. Our patron base and our staff are pretty traditional. They like a nice low volume, reasonable conversation, but we're not militant about it. We're not walking around saying hey, you're too loud. There's another one of the bullet points further along that use a term that I really like, which is above the standard of the rest of the library. So I think that's when we would get into enforcement. If the library's at a certain volume and something rises way above it, we would be like, oh, what's going on over there? But we're not in general looking for reasons to keep people quiet.
And it sounds in louder volume than the general noise level of the
Yeah.
room.
Because I always feel like weird about talking in like a normal voice in the library, but like, I come and
I do too.
people, like, it's like, you encounter different things here.
And it depends on where you are in the building, because if you're here in the stacks, the ceilings are nice and high, so you'd have to make a lot of noise for it to carry. You go into the children's section, lower ceiling, the noise carries
Yeah,
much
but
more
it's also a
easily.
different part of the library.
There's less of an expectation of
Yeah.
quiet.
Yeah.
And then you go into a study room and it's, you speak a reasonable volume, it's loud.
All right. So anyway, I'm fine with number 2. Number 3, engaging in any kind of sexual activity or lewd behavior or sexually harassing any other person. And we have some paragraphs here, any form of intimidation or harassment, whether direct or implied, physical or verbal, directed at the gender or sexual orientation of a patron or staff member will not be tolerated. Persons exhibiting such behavior will be asked to leave premises. And then offensive remarks, comments, innuendos, or insinuations of sexual nature, however intended when directed to a patron or a staff member, are inappropriate and should be avoided at all times.
Those are different standards for those two things.
I think we want to really call that out as just an area of focus to reinforce, because the general heading of that, the engaging in sexual activity, lewd behavior, is sexually harassing. People might not think, oh, I'm flirting with you, I'm not sexually harassing you, or I'm asking a question about your gender, I'm not sexually harassing you.
But no, I get that, but I'm saying, why is A immediately asked to leave and B is not gonna be tolerated? So,
Yeah,
That might just be something to clean up the language.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's
because you're right, most of these don't have enforcement in them.
Yeah, so that's what I was kind of thinking, because we have this under that engaging in any kind of sexual activity or lewd behavior or sexually harassing any other person. And
I think you could take that out, because that's not up to them to kick them out immediately. What if they say, please stop doing that, and they stop?
Right.
You know?
Yeah, that's, and it kind of contradicts the other enforcement pieces. With that coming out.
The person's exhibiting such behavior will be asked to leave the premises. Yeah, it's just a little strong as opposed to the other stuff, which is not as strong. So then you're like,
How come
one
this gets
scope is
booted?
right.
Yeah.
But I understand why you're saying that,
Yes.
but I just
so
think-
I might be inclined to rephrase this as the first one, the 3, have it engaging in any kind of sexual activity, lewd behavior, or sexually harassing any other person, including,
Mhm.
and then have A and B, and get rid of that person's exhibit, the last sentence of A, just including any form of intimidation, harassment, etc., and including offensive remarks, comments that are when directed, and get rid of that are inappropriate and should be avoided.
Yeah,
Just those are like, we do that, including these 2 categories, because they both kind of fit under the broad category of like sexual harassment. Right, I would say.
yeah. So I say including and not limited, but not limited to,
Yeah, well, I think our whole policy is not.
yeah,
limited to,
I
so
know.
Right.
Sexual activity and lewd behavior, or I would just say sexual harassment without any other, I don't know if any other person's there. So here's my suggestion. Engaging in any kind of sexual activity, lewd behavior, or sexual harassment,
Mhm.
including, and then we have A and B.
Mhm.
That's my suggestion, just to kind of.
A and B, and then take that person's exhibiting such behavior as a leave and take out,
Appropriate, charted at all
Yeah.
times.
right.
Now for number 4, I had concern about because engaging in, should it be right in?
Yeah.
Gambling or other games of chance and library pride. Games of chance, like, I mean, that's not, well, because we specifically said we're like getting rid of the prohibition on board games. And
Yeah.
I feel like, well, kids are gonna, I don't know, use a study room and do a Dungeons and Dragons game or something like that. I mean, they're rolling dice for all the things. It's a game of chance and like that, you know, whatever. I think narrowing it just to like, if we want to make it a little broader, like engaging in gambling or, you know, any like wagers for money or something, I don't know, broad like that, just to be clear, that's what we care about. It's not the
game.
it's not the game,
It's the money.
it's the money,
Yeah.
you know?
Yep, that would work.
Yes, that's fine.
Like gambling or, I don't know if you want to make it, or, you know, wagering for, you know, money or anything of value or something like that.
Engaging in gambling or wagering money or items of value.
Mhm.
Something like that. And that keeps it broad, but doesn't sweep in all these other games.
Right. And that way, if, you know, kids are playing games for jelly beans or whatever, we don't have to, staff are gonna feel the need to come down on them.
Yeah.
So
All right.
I think 5 has a similar thing to 3, where you would want to take out smoking of any type is prohibited on the library property by New York State law. I mean,
I would say the way that this, you know, this one, unlike 3 where A and B seem to be kind of like subcategories of it, 5, A and D seem to just be like kind of slightly different. I mean, I guess.
We get questions, so specifically one that's come up is, it's actually the library's responsibility to enforce the non-smoking, and if we don't, it's on us.
Okay.
We had one, the staff didn't know that it's completely illegal to smoke on library property, and 2 patrons didn't realize it was a New York State law. So it was, I think the point of that one is to help guide people into, hey, it's legal to smoke, you just can't do it here, you have to go over there.
Right.
And to be like, no, it's not just us, it's New York State. There's a catch-all at the end that says behavior prohibited by federal, state, and local laws also prohibited. But folks, that doesn't help if folks don't know what the law is.
but what about B?
So-
Under the influence of drugs, of alcohol resulting in erratic behavior or disrupting use. I don't know that.
I feel like that would,
I might, if we're gonna have that, I might incorporate that into the first line of 5, just to say using or because it's both about alcohol or other drugs. So you say using or distributing alcohol or illegal / non-prescribed drugs, or being under the influence of drugs or alcohol resulting in erratic behavior or disrupting the use of life of others. Kind of like lump those together and then have a separate one for the tobacco products, which is its own kind of different category.
and then we could lead with smoking of any type is prohibited by New York State law.
Oh, I see what you're saying, because 5 only refers to, well, actually, no, it refers to alcohol and illegal, but doesn't say smoking.
Yeah, I mean, oh, for B, you mean? Or no, for
For
A?
5, like,
Oh, for 5, yeah. So I would lump 5, the first line of 5 and B, I would kind of combine those together and then have smoking be its own category.
Yeah, make it number 6.
What you were saying, Pete, that like lead off with the smoking is prohibited?
Yeah, just, you know, making it very direct.
But it has its own bullet.
Yeah, we can make it into its own separate thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
you mean to say smoking of any type is prohibited and then say using tobacco products, blah, blah, blah? Is that what you're
It could just be smoking of any type is prohibited on library property by New York State law. It would read different than the other bullets, but.
Yeah, because then it doesn't flow with the fact that these are prohibited activities.
Right.
I like it better as a sentence
Yes,
after the prohibited activity.
we could do it as, you know, just turn 5A into a separate thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's probably the easiest. We'll just put that one out. You know, it is a little weird to have that prohibited by law, you know, thing at the end, but I understand what you're saying. If I want to specify, this isn't just our policy, this is something that,
So 5 would say using or distributing alcohol or illegal non-prescribed drugs and being under the influence of drugs or alcohol resulting in erratic behavior, disrupting blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And then 6 would say using tobacco products, etc.
Mhm.
The rest of that sentence, okay.
All right. All right, and then moving on to.
Well,
Stick,
would be
we are,
seven.
we already, yeah, so, well, I'm just gonna use the number.
Yeah.
So we have carrying all weapons on library premises. What's that?
Right,
On library premises, including lawfully registered concealed weapons to the fullest extent permitted by law.
But what does that mean? Carrying all weapons from the library, on library premises, including lawfully registered concealed weapons to the fullest extent permitted, what does that mean?
So I'm not positive what New York State's law is regarding like handguns or
But we're saying they're prohibited.
to the extent permitted by law. I don't know that we're allowed to say, and this is why I'm a lawyer. I don't know if we're allowed to say.
If they have a concealed permit,
Yeah,
does the library allow them to have them on library property?
I don't know if we have to allow them, would be the question.
Yeah, and I don't know the answer. I suspect that in New York that we can prohibit it, but I don't know that for a fact.
Yeah, I mean, this whole policy would need legal review, but that's one item I like. Or,
Yeah, I don't know that. I don't know if you can.
because we could, certainly weapons that aren't permitted, like, if somebody brings in an improvised blade or something, we can say, no, that clearly violates our policy. It would just be lawfully registered weapons.
I think we should try and get an answer to that, and just find out, because to the extent that under New York law, it's permissible to prohibit carrying of concealed weapons, then
Federal, is that federal?
I think it varies from state to state, most likely, but again, I don't know for sure, so I'm gonna
I don't know either.
check that out. But if we could, I think maybe we should try and look into it, because we could potentially then chop out that it's the fullest extent permitted by law.
Mhm.
And just leave it as carrying all weapons in library premises, including lawfully registered concealed weapons, if that is permissible for the library.
Right.
Yeah,
Like, what about carrying any weapons on library
Yes.
premises?
any is better than all here, because, yeah. Carrying any weapons on library premises, including lawfully registered concealed weapons. So I'll try and check into that.
Unless permitted under concealed. permit, I don't know. Are you gonna check on that, or are we gonna ask our attorney?
We can ask our attorney. Um, Yeah, because we should just find out to what extent, are there any limitations on us having that, prohibition?
I think there was a federal Supreme Court decision a couple of years ago that affected New York, but I don't know exactly how.
Yeah, I don't think there's been anything that, because that was, that was specifically, there was a case that was specifically about New York State that was, but that was about like concealed carry in general, like, in public, because that dealt with the issuances of the permits in the first place. But I don't know as far as like, I don't know that we'll have to look into it. So I'm not sure how, I think that's an area that's unfortunately not super well settled right now. So I don't know, we might need to give a caveat or something like that.
Yeah, it was dated in 2022, so it's still pretty.
Yeah.
Concealed carry policy, concealed carry law.
All right, so that needs a little more looking into, so we can figure out if there's something we need to do about. Seven, damaging or theft of library or patron property.
I don't think patrons.
Probably not. That's a carry over.
So number 7 becomes 8, right? Because we're making number 6. the
Yeah,
smoking.
everything's gonna get shifted. Do we, just for parallelism, do we want to say damaging or stealing?
I didn't want to say because I'm like, maybe I'm being too finicky, but damaging is like an ongoing verb and theft is a noun, and I'm just
Yeah.
like, I don't
I
know.
think that the grammatical changes appreciated, yeah.
Damage or theft or damaging or.
Well, damaging goes along with our everything else with.
If it's damaging or stealing.
Yeah.
Okay, 8, entering or using the library in bare feet or without a shirt.
Again, library has to be either
Oh,
capitalized or
yeah,
not
yeah,
capitalized.
yeah. Let's, I think we've been doing library capital throughout, right?
Yeah.
Let's stay consistent with that. Patrons must remain fully clothed while using the library. All right.
No problem with that.
Okay. Having bodily hygiene or possessions/belongings that are of such a strong odor that it would impede the use of the library by others, including heavily applied perfumes/lotions/hygiene products. I guess that's fine. It feels like it's awkwardly worded a little bit.
But I don't know how I would change.
Yeah. All right. 10, bathing or changing clothing in public restrooms.
A question on that. A kid is, at the library and then he has a little league game coming up. I've known a lot of people that have had the kids change in the bathroom.
I was going to give almost exactly the same example. I was going to say soccer game instead of Little League, but I was thinking the exact same thing. I've been places, I don't know if it was ever the library, but I can remember plenty of times when my kids were younger, like being out someplace and they have to get to soccer practice or whatever, and you just, bring them into the restroom or whatever and just say, hey, change into your soccer stuff or whatever, and bring them out or whatever. I mean, I've done that at my work. When I've had softball games from my office, and I just go into the bathroom in the office and change into, clothes to go play softball. It's not library, but still, it's like just moving into a stall and changing because you got to get somewhere. So I understand that, in general, that's not the purpose of providing, the bathroom facilities here. And what are the specific problems that this motivates this? That's what I.
So if it was a single use stall and somebody went in to change, no one would be the wiser, and we'd be like, that, like if someone asked us, if someone was
Yeah.
like, hey, can I change? We would say, sure, go into a single use room. It's fine.
Like the ones over there, and I'm just,
Yep,
I would break that apart. I would say bathing in public restrooms, and then the other one would be changing clothing in the.
Do we really need that one though?
Well,
It's,
I mean, if they change in the big one where you have 5 stalls and there's a woman just undressing in front of everybody that's in there, I don't know that that would be appropriate. It would harm the other patrons that don't want to see her naked.
it's
No,
too.
but don't most of them do it in the stall if they're gonna do it?
No, but that's what I'm saying. I think we should say that.
So what if we said bathing in public restrooms or or I was gonna say, or changing clothes except in single-use stalls or restrooms?
Well, you can't bathe in a single, that's why I was.
No, that's separate, right?
Yeah.
So it would just be bathing in public restrooms or changing clothes except in single-use stalls or restrooms?
Mhm. But you're still keeping them together.
Oh, I guess we could separate them out.
I think you'd have to separate them, yeah.
Okay, so 10, so the one will just be bathing in public restrooms, and another one separated out as a new bullet will be changing clothing except in single-use stalls or restrooms.
Yeah.
Damaging public restrooms in such a way that prevents their use by others. I mean, it's probably redundant with the damaging library property, but it doesn't hurt necessarily, I suppose.
It's another one of those ones that I want to call one out
Yeah.
specifically.
Okay. Entering staff areas by patrons, using meeting rooms without authorization, or improperly using restrooms or other areas in and around library buildings.
Yeah, the last section, I'm trying to remember what we were trying to accomplish that wasn't covered by a different bullet. The big ones really are getting into areas where patrons aren't supposed to be, so holding up in study rooms or
Using meeting rooms without their authorization, or is it Do they have to sign up for them
They reserve them, so it could be without
without
reservation.
reservation, prior reservation, I guess? So, but what if they're what if they're not reserved? Are they allowed to go in there?
They're supposed to ask the desk, and
Gotcha.
say like, do you have a study room available?
Okay. All right, so without reservation,
Mhm.
and then improperly using restrooms or other. I don't know.
Yeah, it's been a little while since we've read this, so I'm struggling to remember what we were hoping to accomplish.
Improperly using restrooms or other areas. I mean, that's so large.
Yeah.
I don't know what that means. Doing cartwheels in the hallway? I mean, I don't know.
In theory, I think improperly using restrooms is covered by damaging, bathing, and changing.
Mhm.
Other areas in and around library buildings, I'm not positive what we're going for. It could have been
Yeah.
sleeping, it could have been obstructing.
That one's a little weird.
You already have loitering or sleeping. Got the next one.
Yeah, I might be inclined to get rid of the end of that, just
Yeah.
entering. So entering staff areas, we keep that and using meeting rooms without a reservation.
Mhm.
But drop the end of it
Mhm.
because it's kind of covered by other things or overly vague. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
All right, loitering or sleeping on library property. Exactly sure it's covered by loitering in this context.
Yeah, it's, because really, sleeping's the main attraction of
Come
this.
on, Janeway.
Right, that previous meeting group that we're trying to usher out of here where they loitering, I think that would be more of like staying on library.
Councilwoman Romero, yeah.
Chase her out of here.
Yeah, I'm just not exactly sure what we're covering by loitering.
I think that would be more of if they're at the library after hours lingering, but I mean, people might be using Wi-Fi in the parking lot, so I'm not positive with that one either.
Well, that's, I mean, that's the thing, like a lot of things that like other businesses would be loitering are like normal library, like activities.
Exactly, like I'm on my phone out front because that's where Wi-Fi is.
Just like walking back and forth down the aisles, browsing the bookshelves or whatever, that's kind of loitering, but it's also what you're supposed to do in a library, so it's kind of.
Buy something, get out.
I don't know. I'm good.
I would say leave it because isn't that, what is loitering? Just like a group of loud people sort of hanging around,
It's
ruckus?
usually it doesn't need a ruckus. Loitering is just like hanging somewhere without any specific purpose. Just kind of, it's like when you're just like, kind of just milling around out on the sidewalk in front of some business, but you're not really there for any specific purpose. You're just kind of hanging around. And they're like, no loitering, get out of there.
Yeah, we encourage it.
Should say encouraging. Loitering is encouraged.
I think its purpose is to be I don't know, I can't think of an example of enforcing it unless somebody was doing something. I tend to think that if they were doing something else that was obstructing people, it's caught somewhere else in the policy.
Asking for money?
That's captured elsewhere.
Yeah.
And like if they're hanging around harassing people, then we would get them on harassment and not loitering.
Yeah, I might want to just cut loitering.
Mhm.
Just let's make that one sleeping, just like, because it's just too, I just don't know what that's supposed to get at.
And just before we move on, do you feel strongly about keeping entering staff areas by patrons and using meeting rooms without reservation together?
I don't
Do
feel.
you feel like they're so connected that they have to be in the same line?
I mean, they're,
It's not, I'm not,
they're
you know,
connected in the sense that they're both about like being
entering.
in places you're not supposed to be, but they are different as well,
Yeah, I could go either way. I mean, if we were trying
Do you
to,
want to split them? I'm okay with splitting them too.
Yeah, I mean, why not?
Yeah, but couldn't we clarify that to say that they would, instead of saying without authorization, without checking in at the desk, so that people are aware that if they're empty and they want to use them, just check with the desk and they'll open them for you.
Instead of reservation, yeah, perhaps that's better.
I mean, you think it's better? We could say that, I think reservation works, you could say without permission. Just kind of
Right.
a little broader. So-
Permission is better because then they think they have to make a reservation 30 days ahead or something.
Yeah,
You want to go with permission?
sure.
Yeah,
because reserving is essentially asking permission.
yeah. Now, are there any, I'm trying to just think, are there areas that are normally staff areas that are sometimes open for people that like, do we say, do we also say entering staff only areas without permission also, or is that just a give, like we're just?
So we have staff only areas. The only areas that might be used by either staff or the public are some of our meeting rooms, but the staff reserve them. So they're reserving them like a patron.
So just keep it at entering staff only area. As we said, we don't have to say by patrons, right?
I don't think we have to.
Because
These whole things are geared to patrons. Yeah.
All right.
Sleeping. Obstructing access. Oh, so this was covered, obstructing access to library resources or staff.
Okay, so 15, I might just rephrase this one because the rest of them are all like the prohibited things. And here we're starting out, this is not prohibited, you know? So maybe saying, start out by saying consuming food or drink in a manner that damages library property or impacts the ability of other patrons to use the library. Just to break it that way. Yeah. Okay. And then we have, what was that?
I just say, going back to that sleeping, if somebody has been studying and they crash on their book for, 15 minutes, can we somehow allow for that? Because I know it happens.
Yeah, so typically you get not even like a warning, like it's kind of like a wellness check where we tap the table and say, hey, are you okay? And if they pop up and they're like, oh, sorry, I was, so engrossed in my book, I fell asleep. Then it's like, okay, don't do it again. This is more aimed at like people who are camping out here for the day and keep going back to sleep.
Right.
Yeah, no,
I guess it's discretionary kind of.
it is, yeah. And we frame that to the patrons as wellness to be like, we have to make sure you're okay.
But I think that kind of goes for the vast majority of these things. It's kind of, there's enforcement discretion where if somebody does something, if they're talking a little too loud, you go over first and say, hey, can you be quiet? You don't just kick them out.
Right. Yep.
It's the same thing. If somebody falls asleep, like wake them up gently or whatever, and just kick them out and just say, oh, you're okay. I think that's enforcement discretion or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So on back to the food one, we have the second line, all food debris and trash is the responsibility of the patron who brings it to the library. That's fine. We could kind of frame, rephrase it so it's more like the other, like say what we're prohibiting, leaving food debris or trash or whatever, and instead of framing like that. But I don't know if it hurts anything to just keep it how it is. Anybody have a strong feeling either way?
No, it's fine the way it is.
All right. All right. Bringing roller skates, rollerblades, skate shoes, skateboards, bicycles, shopping carts, or similar items into the library or using them on library property. Because we have a bike rack outside.
Yeah, that was tough because library property extends to the parking lot. What we don't want them doing is bringing them into the building.
Yeah, you wouldn't want somebody to just ride in circles around the parking lot on their bike probably either, but I don't know if that's an issue. But on library property, people are gonna ride into the street and turn their bike over on the rack.
Right.
Son does it. He rides up here, so.
So because when it comes to most of the other items, except for bicycles, we might enforce that in the parking lot, but really the thrust of this is don't bring something with wheels, like these items into the building.
Yeah. Trying to think.
You could have a footnote on bicycles, a little asterisk, and say bicycles are permitted as long as stored in their whatever designated.
Yeah, that's appropriate storage.
Right.
Yeah. Use the bike rack.
Right.
Don't chain it to a bench.
So
Right.
this the A under 16 seems a little funny to me, using any of the above to block library doors or otherwise obstruct access. I mean, do we have a general one about blocking doors and obstructing access? It seems weird to kind of have
Yeah.
that very specific just for wheeled items and not just like.
Happened.
It did happen. We had 14 as the general obstructing access to library resources. I think that
Right.
one covers it.
Yeah. It just seemed a little,
I think some of our staff have PTSD that somebody must have blocked a door with the bikes
Oh my
at some point.
All right, so I mean, I guess we could take that off.
I also, this little roller skates, rollerblades, skate shoes, skateboards. See, those ones are all kind of like vehicle type things, things you ride around on, things like that. Then you got shopping carts.
Mhm.
And that muddies the waters.
But it has wheels.
I think I
Feel.
put it in there because it was all,
But I'm thinking like, what if you got the farmer's market and people have dollies to like, wheel stuff out of the, back of their truck to like put it on the table or whatever. Is that prohibited because it's a wheeled item that you just it's, yeah, I don't know. I don't want to be too.
we did have, it's resolved itself, but we did have a patron who's leaving their shopping cart out front and, obviously they didn't have any place else to leave it, but like
Yeah.
that's the behavior with the shopping cart.
Yeah, that's.
Wait. I don't know. What is her situation?
It was somebody who had their possessions in their shopping cart. We believe they were unhoused. We had some conversations with them and they moved on. I think they felt they were being scrutinized, but
Should we allow them then to be on here? I thought libraries are for everyone.
it's more of they were leaving it overnight, like they were like storing their shopping cart here. I think we would look at it differently, like someone was using the library, they brought their shopping cart in and then they left with it. But leaving it here overnight, it's like, hey, you can't do that.
I want to discriminate against the unhoused.
Yeah, it's just someone, I might, because do we have any, we don't have a specific thing I was just thinking about that. What's our, I mean, I know sometimes people come to the parking lot just to use the Wi-Fi and that might be outside of normal library operating hours, but do we have any? There's nothing about like, maybe something about leaving, because we don't want people leaving like cars in the parking lot overnight or things like that. Yeah, so maybe something that's general about leaving, cars, or other property or something.
Cars on their personal property.
Other personal property on library property overnight, or whatever, just
Well, would you tow it? I'm curious.
If they left it here for a couple of days, like with cars, we would tow it.
Right.
Overnight, like we had somebody who had a medical emergency and they left in an ambulance and they left their car here. And I kind of went around to staff and it's like, don't freak out, there's gonna be a car in the parking lot. If somebody had like a disabled car here, we would tow it, but like one night, 2 nights, we're probably not gonna freak out.
Is that, I mean, maybe that would solve
Mhm.
that shopping cart issue and wouldn't have to work, Unfortunately, I have to get going. I have a,
Get down to that.
it's sorry. Yeah, I'm actually, I have a kid I have to pick up here shortly, so I'm definitely.
But this has been incredibly helpful.
All right.
So
We made it most of the way through. Maybe we'll try and do another meeting in another week or two before we have to, when is our board meeting this month? 2 weeks from now?
2 weeks.
So maybe we can find a day next week possibly, and we can finish this up and if we have a quorum.
Better do it before my basketball season starts.
When-
It's gonna be crazy.
All right. All right, well, maybe that, hopefully we can do that. I'll try and send something out shortly and try and set something out. Okay. All right.
All right, well, good stuff.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, thanks.
Thanks, Barbara.
Enjoy the nice weather.
It's been beautiful. We've been blessed.
Yeah.
See you later.
When do you come back up?
On March 15th.
Oh, okay. So pretty soon.
Yep. See you later.
Enjoy.
Bye. All right.